Welcome to the Recruiter Startup Podcast. I'm joined today by Paul Masters from Sovereign Private. How are you today, sir?
Fantastic, dualta. How are you?
I'm very well. Very well. The public cried out for your name and we delivered. We got the man, the deal maker, the man that makes things happen down under. We got him on. We're going to figure out today some of the stuff in the M&A world for recruitment firms. And I suppose it just will begin by, how did you get into this?
Well, it probably goes back to the early 2000s when recruitment was a bit of a different place in Australia. There wasn't quite as many businesses as there is today. It's very competitive world today down under. But back in the early 2000s, there was I think it was the industry had matured to a point where a number of players had come in, particularly private equity, had come in and seen opportunities. And I was working with two businesses that had private equity injections, and both of those businesses ended up going to IPO and had successful lives as public companies until one went through a second round of private equity, and that was a company here called People Bank. And there was another business that I was heavily involved with, which was a business called Talent 2, which was a spin-off from some guys that originally set up a company called Morgan and Banks, and that was eventually sold to Allegis as part of a deal back in 2012.
Back then, how dominating were Hayes Half, Walters, and fourth? Who's the fourth player in that? There's
Randstad was around. There was Hayes is obviously the most dominant player in Australia. But it was a slightly different world back then. I think that there was a huge amount of consolidation in Australia around, well, just prior to the GFC. Through that round of 2005 to 2009, there was a lot of consolidation within the industry, and there were a number of public companies that were listed on the Australian Stock Exchange that made multiple acquisitions. Some of them exist today, and some of them don't. So it was an exciting time back then. But unfortunately, as we see with some consolidations within the industry, they just don't work. So I was working on the tax side of some of those consolidations back then, and so some of them worked really well, and some of them didn't.
And with regards, when you started to get into the deal side of recruitment firms, what part do you come in?
Yeah, well, it seemed an obvious avenue. I ran the tax team at Deloitte up until 2014, based in Sydney, and I'd been running an industry group at Deloitte, which was a national group, which focused on recruitment, and we had a significant number of clients within the industry, and I think that my focus was predominantly tax back then, but I've been involved in so many M&A transactions over the 20 years that I'd been doing work for recruitment businesses. I knew a lot of people in the industry. I knew who the major global players were. I knew who was acquiring, who was acquisitive in Australia. and it seemed a logical avenue to go down. And in Australia, there are requirements. You have to have a special license to be a corporate advisor for companies. You just can't go in there and start advising on buy sides or sell sides without this license. It took 18 months, 24 months to get this license, which was, you've got to jump through a lot of hoops to get. And once we got it, we started going down that road of assisting mainly on sell side transactions, so assisting the owners of businesses look at divestments. So it was, I suppose we'd been with companies, we'd been with a number of private companies for so long. It was the last stage in the life cycle of these companies to provide this M&A advice to business owners when they looked at divesting.
And I suppose it's not like you're just coming in at the last minute. A large part of the time you're their tax advisor and accountant.
Yeah, that's right. So when we started the firm, I broke away from Deloitte in 2014 and started Sovereign Private. Back then, it was predominantly to focus in the recruitment industry, and we instantly picked up a lot of clients within the industry. And then I negotiated a deal with Deloitte, which is always difficult when you're a partner and you're leaving. The restraints are extremely tight, to take a number of my clients with me. And we've since grown that. We provide the tax advice, but also all the accounting support that goes with that business. So it's being a lot more than just a tax advisor or accountant. It's being somebody that understands the industry. It's about them being able to speak to us and understand what they're doing right. How do they benchmark against other businesses in the industry? In terms of commission structures, are there commission structures? A, are they viable? Are they B, are they competitive? And looking at margins on contractor costs, or I suppose it comes down to people just want to understand, are they competitive in the industry? Are they successful in the industry? And if there's ways to improve that, how do they do it? What are other businesses out there doing? And that's what we found that our clients wanted.
And if we bring this to modern day, so you obviously have a portfolio of people that you're doing tax advice to, but then you'll have other people who inquire. Do you then go and do like an audit on their business, or do you send like a recruitment specific NED in to do that work? How does that whole process work?
Yeah, look, financial governance is critically important, and as well as tax governance and legal governance within businesses. So it's from a financial and tax governance point of view, when we're assisting an owner sell a business, we want to ensure that they withstand the scrutiny of due diligence, and that is a long process in some cases. A lot of private companies are run in sometimes a cowboy fashion, and it's we all use the term in the industry, lifestyle businesses, and it's about getting that financial governance and tax governance and legal governance to a point where we know that if a large, if one of the large international players comes in and does they get one of the big four accounting firms to do the due diligence, and one of the major law firms to do DD, we're confident that it will withstand that scrutiny. And it doesn't happen overnight. That process can take in some cases 3-4 years by the time that we've got the business in an exit ready state.
Do you have categories of sizes of businesses that you deal with, and are there some that are just too small for you?
It's a good question. If we see a smaller business, and let's say, I'll use US millions for the purposes of this discussion. If it's less than $1 million in profit before tax, the only reason we'd probably take it on at that stage is if we're seeing potential with the business. Like they're in a sector that's considered to be quite attractive in the industry, whether that's healthcare, IT, or or life sciences, any of those areas that are considered to be in demand at the moment. We'll certainly take those on. Generally, most of our clients would have a profit before tax of anything over $2 million to probably $10 million profit before tax.
Yeah. So is that usually like a 50 head company at a max?
Yeah. Exactly. Probably go up to maybe 60, 70 if there's multiple offices. Yeah. But yeah, generally you're right. It'll be around that 50 mark.
And there's always here's the question that everybody's waiting for, and you're probably waiting for, is the multiple and the tax, the multiple and the perm versus contract element of that. What's changed since COVID? Has anything?
Yeah, well, I think we've all seen the ramifications of being heavily perm. It's something that we've continuously stressed with our clients early on that have had a more perm-centric business. That push into contracting, the commissions are not quite as high for consultants. It's certainly not considered to be, the consultants don't get the quick fix that maybe they get with perm, but boy, do they notice it in periods like this when they can get up in the morning knowing that even if they didn't show up, the money is still rolling in the door from a contracting book. So it's in terms of multiples, the things are still, I wouldn't say they've changed significantly. There's been changes based on sectors, I think, within the industry post-COVID. But in those sectors that are considered to be quite cyclically resilient, like IT contracting, we're still seeing multiples that are, maybe they're not quite as good as what they've previously been, but they're holding up reasonably well considering the state of the environment out there.
So let's say it's a 2 million EBITDA. 70% contract business. Are we talking a 7 multiple?
Yeah, I think pre COVID, we're talking 7, even possibly higher. One of the transactions that I worked on the sell side for last year was the sale of a business called Audits to Randstad. It was one of the first deals that Randstad had done in a long time. I think they'd been scarred by the monster transaction in the US, and that took years to clean up. And this was their one of their first fortes back into acquisition mode. The multiple achieved there was over 7. Well over 7. I think we're probably in a position now where we've seen probably a slight drop off there, just due to it's difficult to create competitive tension when you've got a number of acquirers globally that have put a halt on acquisitions until things return back to some form of normality. And it's that, I suppose it's that competitive tension that is lacking, that I would say that it must drive multiples down to some degree. Because you just, it's not as though we're not going to have 10 buyers lined up at the table. It's just not going to be the case at the moment.
And let's say it's a perm business of 1 million and it's 10. What are we talking, 3 or 4?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, maybe a bit high. It depends what sector, but let's talk in, if it was IT, I'd say probably 4.5. If it's finance and banking, maybe you might be dropping down a little bit, maybe to 3.5, 4. And it just, as we know, multiple is linked to future maintainable earnings, and we're unfortunately white collar positions are probably under a lot more pressure, in that banking and finance vertical than say IT.
So I suppose this question can go a couple of ways, but who's the most likely buyer of a small recruitment business or small to medium sized recruitment business? Let's say it's technology, it's white collar, it's in Australia. Who's purchasing this?
Yeah, it'd be somebody local. Anything up to probably 3 million profit before tax of 3 million US. Anything sort of up to that, you're probably looking at a private buyer in Australia or one of the public companies here. There's a company here that's listed on the ASX a couple of years ago called People Infrastructure. They've made a number of acquisitions, but based on what we can see, and obviously this is all in the Australian Stock Exchange releases, we can see that they're paying multiples of anywhere between 4 to 5 for businesses. Now, I would say that's on the low side. When I've been working on transactions in Australia, they have been one of the parties that have come to the table. I've advised my clients against the lower multiples on the basis that I know that there were, this is pre-COVID, there were international buyers that were interested in the Australian market, and those. Unfortunately, we don't see a lot of US buyers here. It's very rare. The Allegis deal was probably the last big deal that was done in Australia by US business. There was a franchising business called Frontline, which was a smaller deal recently. But apart from that, there hasn't been much US interest. The interest comes out of Japan, number one, and secondly out of Europe.
Okay, interesting. One of the things that always has fascinated me about the Australian market is they're quite localized in how they think and how they work. So if you compare it to like when you look at the companies that are valued high in the UK and that are on that growth trajectory, typically they'll have one major office, a couple of regional offices, and they might even have 2 USA offices. Whereas the Australians, they usually even seem to say maybe they might be in 3 cities, but that'll be it. Is there a reason that advice is coming to them to do that? Yeah,
look, I'm not going to lie. It is difficult setting up international offices from Australia. As a lot of your listeners would probably know, there are a huge amount of expats that have come from the UK, particularly with the larger recruitment firms that started out here and eventually stayed out here and been very successful with setting up recruitment businesses in Australia. Now, I know that a lot of those end up saying, well, let's have a London office. We've got a Sydney, we've got a Melbourne office, we've got a Brisbane office. Let's set up a London office. It is so difficult from a number of perspectives. Time zone is probably number one, but it just, you think that it would be, that it would be a no-brainer, and it would be an easy feat. But the problem is the distance and the time zone are very, very difficult. The problem that we've got, our obvious time zones are Asia, and the guys that have set up in Singapore and Hong Kong. It is challenging, as we all know from a cultural point of view. It can be quite challenging. There are businesses that have been very successful, and then some of them are my clients that have set up in Asia. But it's difficult. It probably works for 1 in 5, I would say, and the other 4 blow significant profits over a period of normally 3 years until they work out that it's just too difficult.
Yeah, it's something that always interests me. The British companies do travel well wherever they go, and maybe it's just down to the competitive landscape of 40,000 agencies in the UK. So it's slightly different. Okay, we've covered quite a bit, Paul. What usually happens from the moment a founder approaches you to the moment they exit? Could you kind of give us an inflection on the different points of that journey?
Yeah, are you saying early on when they maybe they approach us to do tax work initially, or are you saying that when somebody approaches us and they want to sell then? Is it? Let's
go with I want to sell, but I don't know anything about tax, and maybe I shouldn't even be in this meeting with you. But like, I'm sure you've had every scenario, and there must be a step-by-step process where you're like, okay, first I'm going to look at where you're at. Is there an audit? What does that journey look like? And you mentioned it can take up to 3 years.
Yeah, it is interesting. Quite often we find that the business isn't structured particularly well. It's and in Australia we have a number of different ways you can structure a business, and probably the most effective way is where businesses are structured in a company. No different than most other places around the world. There are, however, a number of cheaper structures that may have seemed like a good idea at the time of setup, but cause significant problems later down the track when the business is sold.
Is that like a partnership model?
Yeah, partnership is one. Trust is another. We see a lot of businesses that are set up in trust, and trust may be a very cheap structure to set up in initially, but they cause significant problems for business owners later on when they're looking at divesting. So one of the things we initially have to do is go through a process of moving the business away from a unit trust or away from a trust into a company, and that can take some time to do. It's not only the tax consequences; it's about moving client agreements, client contracts, contractors, bank accounts, leases. It can be significantly difficult from both a tax point of view and administration point of view. But it's so important that structure is right for an acquirer to come and say, we'll look at it. We like what we see. Everything looks in order. it looks ready to go. So yeah, that's probably the first step. The second step is dealing with I suppose, skeletons. Looking to see what skeletons are there within the business. And in Australia, sorry, what was that?
Is that like bad debt or?
No, it's more to do with latent tax liabilities or latent legal issues. So we and I think this is getting the business ready for if they are going to going through a sale process, they are going to have one of the big four accounting firms come in, and they're going to dig up every skeleton that they can find to try to reduce the purchase price. So it's, what is there? Are there tax issues? Are there latent tax issues that haven't been identified? Are there latent legal issues? And we work with a number of lawyers in Sydney and Melbourne to identify issues, but the majority of them relate to employment law, and try to resolve those matters. So that may be resolving the matter within the entity or restructuring the whole business so that we can clean it up.
Wow. I suppose just to finish up, who should reach out to you outside of Australia from a buy side, sales side perspective? Like there'll be different people, different stages, listeners to this. Who can you help?
I think it's any recruitment business that's in that stage of growth where they've reached a point where they've got a good business. It's probably a business anywhere between sort of maybe $2 to $3 million EBIT or profit before tax, and it's their finance function is struggling. They've got somebody within their finance function that maybe has grown with the business. They might have even been the old office manager or somebody that is probably not qualified to do that role for a business that's in a growth stage. They probably don't understand the finer details of financial due diligence or financial governance and tax governance, and they need somebody to guide them. I mean, it's not their fault they don't know; they just don't know what they don't know, and it's the owners are focusing on front office. They need some support with back office, and that's where we can we can step in and assist them with that journey. Not only through the present of ensuring their function is robust, their financial function is robust, but being with them right through to an exit. So say with that example I gave you of the business that we sold to Randstad, we assisted with that process last year, but we'd been doing their work since 2010.
Sure.
So back when I was at Deloitte, and then they followed me to Sovereign Private. So it was, it's being with somebody for that journey and that life cycle.
And what if I've got a load of money, which I don't, burning a hole in my pocket? I'm a US, UK buyer. What can you help me with?
Look, Australia has got some terrific businesses, very stable businesses here that are, and when I say stable, I don't mean like there is no growth there. There's certainly growth, but what we've seen particularly through this crisis over the last 3 to 4 months is we've seen a number of businesses and that have been quite resilient during this time. And I think it's those businesses that potential buyers should look at and go, well, gee, if they can get through this, they can get through anything. Quite often, I speak to friends, in the accounting world, and they go, oh, gee, Paul, you must be feeling it. You work in, you only work with recruitment businesses. Gee, you must be, on the edge of going broke. And I go, well, actually, my clients are holding up very, very well, considering the circumstances of what's happened and what's gone on. So I think the Australia is, we've got a very stable government here. We in terms of recession, well, yes, we're probably going to have a recession now, but we have not had a recession for over 20 years. And the economy here is extremely robust. We've got a program called JobKeeper, which is sort of like, I suppose it's like furlough. It's a equivalent sort of I suppose it's like fiscal, like a type of fiscal policy that's been injected into businesses in Australia. The government has injected significant funds into Australian businesses, and we've kept cases low here in terms of corona cases, and the environment is doing pretty well. So if there are potential listeners out there that are interested in this market, there are some fantastic companies that are still highly profitable during this time, and it's quite frankly, it's confirmed my belief in a number of the businesses that we've been doing work for. They've performed very well.
Thanks, Paul. Paul, what's the best way people can reach out to you?
They can reach out to me by emailing me direct. My email address is on my website. It's sovereignprivate.com.au, or it's my email address is pmasters@sovereignprivate.com.au. Brilliant.
Thank you so much, Paul.
No, thanks so much, Dollar, and it's been fantastic. All the listening to your podcast has been an absolute pleasure. So no, thanks so much, Dollar.